أهلا بيكم في بودكاست كربون. معاكم أحمد رجب.
Okay, welcome again in a new episode of Carbon Podcast. And today we have a very interesting topic with a very interesting guest. We have been preparing for this for some time, and finally we are here. So today our topic we will be talking about the ESG. ESG, it has been very trending across all the corporates, across all the countries, across all the world, and that's why we got here a global expert from has experience from all over the world. So I want to welcome today Maritza. Hi, Maritza. How are you today?
Hi. Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be here in your podcast. Very fine, thanks. And how are you?
Yeah, it's everything is
Mhm.
good. Yeah, everything is good. So it's our pleasure and honor to host you here in our podcast, Carbon Podcast, today to talk about this interesting topic. And as usual, we have the top-notch experts from all over the world. And today we have you, Maritza Rivera, as an expert in the ESG. So again, I shouldn't say buenas dias, but because it's already afternoon, right? So yeah, ¿cómo estás? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Buenas
Yeah.
tardes.
Yeah, this is
Sorry.
the so let's first let's first giving a small introduction about you for the audience. So I would like you to introduce yourself to the audience to get the full picture about how the long background on the ESG and sustainability that you have. So go ahead, yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I'm from Puerto Rico, but I have lived and worked in 5 different continents. I think that I've been from North to South America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Today I'm in the Middle East. And I have been in the sustainability space since the 90s, so quite some time when it was still a niche. And that living in so many countries, and it has given me the opportunity of working with a lot of environmental issues, which is my background. But as well, we have the social and governance part that comes all together. They interrelate with each other. So as I said, most of my experience is, as I mentioned, is in sustainability, and I have worked across different functions, including strategy, business development, and various operational roles. And I would say my vision is to help companies embed sustainability into their core business, including product design, business strategies, operations, and supply chain. It's a bit about me.
Yeah. This is great. Yeah, interesting profile. And yeah, again, we are very happy and glad that we are hosting you in our podcast. Okay, so let's switch the gears and let's go directly to our topic today. Let's first talk about the ESG. So, first of all, let's put the bottom line. Let's go from the very basic things. What is the ESG? We need to go to give the audience, our audience, today about the more information or to give them more background about the ESG. Everybody's
Yeah.
listening or everybody's hearing about the ESG, environmental, social, and governance, but nobody's like paying more attention about the details. So let's first go with the very basic definitions of the ESG.
That's correct. If we just make it like in a short way, I mean, as we know, as environment is how a company impact the planet. It's about carbon emissions, energy use, water, and biodiversity. When we talk about the S, which is the social, it's focused on people. Is how workers are treated, how communities are engaged, and how engaged and inclusive a company is. And governance, it's about structure and ethical board decisions, transparency, and executive accountability. And this last one,
Mm.
gets misunderstood because people always think it's just a paperwork. But in oil and gas, a governance failure can mean corruption scandals or environmental disasters.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah, this was a very good and how can I say that? Yeah, very good introduction about our topic today. It's getting more and more exciting about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So if we
this
look
is the
at,
very basic thing about the
yes, sorry.
yeah, I was saying this is the very basic definition of the ESG. So if we want to like jump more and like dig deep more about what are behind the ESG or more information about the ESG, and also how can we relate this with the oil and gas and petrochemical. But before that, we need like to dig deep more about the ESG, how the corporates is like handling with the ESG, more information about the ESG.
Yeah, it's like, but if we to look at it, we zoom in into ESG and we look into oil and gas and petrochemicals. Well, E is all about methane leaks, flaring, spills, and long-term decarbonizations. When we talk about the S, these companies are high risk workplaces. So it's the safety and labor
Yeah.
rights and the relationship with the local communities. And the
Mm.
governance, it's with geopolitical influence and past scandals. This industry have to prove transparency more than other ones. So we look about
Right. Yeah.
how is this is crucial into the oil and gas and petrochemical industries is because if we look at these three pillars are linked to capital, compliance, and competitiveness. So if you don't disclose your climate risk, you lose investor trust, and if you ignore the
Mm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion or safety, you lose talent. And governments,
Yeah.
investors, and consumers are holding these companies in oil and gas and petrochemicals accountable like never before.
Mm.
And
Mm. Mm. So, yeah. Go
no,
ahead. Yeah.
and
Sorry.
I was thinking if we look at this um, governments, investors, and consumer, and we look more into detail about it. It's like governments today are under pressure to meet net zero targets. We're talking a lot about reducing emissions and fulfill the Paris Agreement goals. And oil and gas and petrochemicals are major contributors of, as we know, carbon dioxide and methane, making the top targets for like
Yeah.
carbon pricing and mandatory climate risk disclosure. And once money once was used mainly to support fossil fuels, is now going into green energy. So it's not longer about for oil
Mm.
giants to say that they reduce emissions someday, but it's the governments that they're putting pressure into this. And when we talk about investors, for example, we have like BlackRock or Vanguard or the Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund, they're now embed
Yeah.
ESG into investments decisions. And this is why is this is because if we talk about climate risk, there is equal to financial risk. When we talk about climate lawsuits and
Mm.
spills, is equal to billions in fines, and carbon heavy assets, or it's equal to stranded assets or reserves that may become worthless. So if oil executives think ESG is a moral checkbox, in reality, it's not that.
Mm.
It is about how to be in the market. When it comes consumers today, they're very aware about climate change. They're talking about human rights. Plastic is growing,
Absolutely.
and you see that they're through media, social media pressure, protests, boycotts, demand for
Mm.
cleaner energy and more sustainable materials. If we think about what happened once to BP, the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, people lost trust in the company, which hurts its reputation, sales, and hiring for years. So if we look at
Mm.
consumers, they want more than fuel. They want to know how it's produced, how it impacts on the environment, and whether the company truly lives up into its values. So oil and gas companies are facing pressure for all these sides. The governments are tightening regulations, investors are shifting their money, and consumers are demanding change, pushing the industry to adapt. And if we think 10 years ago, oil companies worry about barrels per day, but today they're worried about ESG scores and carbon taxes and whether the next generation of engineers even want to work for them.
Yeah, yeah, that's the absolute true, and you give a very good example about the BP incident. We just need to correlate more about the ESG and oil and gas. So yeah, it's not
Yeah,
a luxurious thing anymore, as we have been talking. It's not like as you mentioned, it's not like a checkbox. It's not like a matter of documentation within the oil and gas corporates. It became the responsibility of the all oil and gas industry and all oil and gas corporates. It is their responsibility, and it's like a commitment, right? And from here, yeah.
that's
So
true.
you mentioned that how yeah the ESG became very crucial for the oil and gas and petrochemical. So let me take from your statements about like the commitment of all the corporates about the environment, because especially the oil and gas industry, this is, I would say, third in place, who's are like polluting the environment much more from the emissions and all of this, and also from the social responsibility, as you mentioned, also from the governance. So it doesn't become like not only making money, as we have been like discussing previously. It is the balance between
Yeah,
making money and also the commitment for all the ESG pillars, like the environment and social and governance. So yeah, I want to hear more from you about like how this balancing and how the corporates in oil and gas, they are taking ESG seriously, and it's not like more luxurious thing, or it's like not more part of the branding. It's very much more one of the strategic things inside the corporates.
absolutely. I mean, it's like, so we can see. I mean, ESG is evolving. It's shifting from a voluntary framework to a strategic and compliance-driven necessity. And this is, as I mentioned, the governments and financial regulators around the world are not longer treating ESG as an optional, but as a mandatory climate disclosures like CSRD that we have in Europe, and then we have integration of ESG into financial reporting standards in Asia, or global efforts to unify ESG taxonomies. So we can say,
Mm.
if we're looking into in the future how ESG is going to look like, it won't be a section in your report. It will be baked into your balance sheets. So it's not going to be something static. It will be more about, it's how the annual reports are working. It's starting. It's not only the future. The future is happening right now, and we see that in how artificial intelligence is powered by ESG data analysis and satellite-based carbon tracking that are used in today's oil and gas companies to measure the scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and you have blockchain for traceability in supply chains. So the next generation of ESG, it won't be just reporting. It will be mostly about predicting, what can go wrong. For example, as the example that I gave,
Mm.
the VP spill, for example. So the focus is moving from what you disclose to what actually you do. So it's about, today companies can see they can see how real reduction it's happening in carbon intensity industries, proven impacts of the diversity, equity, inclusion, and community engagement. And it's not about just having an ESG plan, but it's about proving that your ESG plan is working. So, and this is very giving advantages to some companies, because they're you can see that the trends at companies that lead in ESG have access to cheaper capital, they attract top talent, and the Gen Z professionals, they win more contracts, especially from government on or ESG screen investors. So we see today like clean
Yeah.
energy firms already outperform traditional fossil fuels portfolios on some ESG funds. So if we look about tomorrow, most valuable companies will not just make money, they will also make a meaning through this GSG
Exactly.
platform. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Exactly.
there are some challenges as
Yeah.
well that
This.
we can go into this, but at the end of the day, ESG will disappear as a separate term. It will be a business strategy. It will be embedded we will just not talk about ESG reporting, but more about net zero business models and circular economy integration and
Mm.
sustainability innovations and so on. So in the future, ESG won't be a department, but it will be more like the DNA of a company.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, this actually take us to the future of the ESG, as you mentioned, like the new techs and the new things like the blockchain, and also we have the AI right now in the data analysis. And
Mm.
one more thing that also maybe like one of the future of the ESG, which is the new generation, as we were discussing that.
Mm.
Okay, in addition, all of the cutting edge technologies that is really evolving and developing very quickly nowadays, and also the new generation, especially like the Gen Z, the Generation Z. As you mentioned, that most of the corporates, it's not like more ESG is something that okay, it's a checkbox, but it's also about the branding of the corporate.
Absolutely.
the value of the corporate. It's not only how much money that they are making from the ESG, but it's the value. Because I think for the younger generation, especially Gen Z, and even the generation after that, Gen Alpha,
Mm,
they are really looking forward the values, and they are really how to say that they are really keen on the environmental, and they maybe this will be one of their criteria for choosing a corporate to work with, or if they are getting hired by any corporate, one of
mm,
the questions or one of the incentives that they will be looking for, if this corporate is committed to the environment, are they going to reduce their emissions, are they using like some renewable or renewable or bio-based feedstock or something like this.
yeah.
Because also they are very, as I mentioned, very keen about that. And also in addition to the cutting edge technologies like AI and blockchain for the tracking. So let's get more about the future of ESG. How or what do you think? How the future of ESG is going to be?
So the ESG will be like, as I say, like, it will be some kind of like tracking tools that the company will embedded in the business development. It will not be just some like costly reporting and just something to have there because we have to do it. It will be mostly like this is the way we do businesses because we we talking about
Mm,
net zero business models, we're talking about circular economy, we're talking about R&D, we're talking about innovation, and this ESG, it's crucial, but for the implementation we cannot forget, I mean, today we're facing some challenges, and that's what hindering some companies to see ESG as an embedded sustainability strategy. The same was like, well, if we look into the challenges, there are five things that I would like to mention, and one of the challenges is that data collection and quality. So it's have to do,
mm,
inconsistency of missing ESG data. So it's sometimes very difficult where companies don't know where to find their data. I mean, if we talk about the S part, the social, it's very easy. You can go to the HR, but sometimes when it comes to the environment, it's very difficult for companies to understand, especially when or to get the data, no, understand to get, especially when we're talking on scope 3 emissions, the supply chain impact
yeah, yeah,
made
correct.
tracking
Mm,
progress very difficult, and so that's one of the challenges, for companies implementing ESG. But then we have the second challenge, and that we just was mentioning in between, is about the short term versus the long term goals. um, ESG, some companies they see that it's just a cost, but it is. I mean,
yeah,
at
yeah.
the start, it's a cost, but it pays off later on. So the problem is like some company leaders and investors only care about the short term profits. So building green infrastructure, for example, or cutting carbon might not be the boost in the next quarter earnings, but it's the key to staying strong in the future. And other challenge that we have is the cultural resistance, especially in this traditional industry like mining, manufacturing, and even oil and gas. I mean,
Mm,
they see
yeah,
ESG
yeah.
as a non-essential or soft issue, and and ESG success depends on the company-wide participation. I mean, it's not just the sustainability team. We have to think about the company as whole. Engineers, for example, that who don't believe in climate risk can block innovation in energy transition
Mm,
projects. So again, we should not see this as a silo that only belongs to the sustainability team, because it affects the company as whole. And then we have
yeah,
also
yeah,
the
yeah.
regulatory uncertainty and complexity, because ESG are different in each region. In EU, for example, they have the CSRD, but then if you're talking about in the US, it's called they have the Security and Exchange Commission rules. In Asia, they have the Sustainability Financial Disclosure. I mean, in the UK, they're using the Task Force on Climate-related Financial Disclosures and so on. So everything have different KPIs. So this create confusion and inefficiency. And the fifth issue, the challenge for implementation of ESG, it's what we call the greenwashing. So greenwashing happens when
Mm,
companies say they're green or eco-friendly without real proof. So This is, for example, a company can talk about supporting women, but most leaders are still men, or they promote biodegradable packaging, for example, but only 2% of the products it's biodegradable. So this can hurt, the company's reputation, and companies should back up their claims with real data. So that's another, challenge that we see today when implementing ESG.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, I would take each challenge of those and let's have like a small discussion. The first thing is the data or the accuracy
mm,
of the data. Like as you mentioned, it is very important point that maybe the social data it can be getting by the HR
mm.
some access. They have some access to this data. But from your experience, like getting the data about the environmental, like it is very challenging, especially as you mentioned that in scope 3 about the supply chain, how we are transporting the raw material and the products and that's all the things, and even the
Yeah,
transportation of the employees within the company. It's all under the scope 3. So from your
yeah.
experience, how can we overcome the first challenge, which is getting the data, make the data more accurate? Yeah.
I mean, when it comes, depends what we're talking. When it comes to scope one, is the company, and it's very straightforward. It's the company emissions, and scope
Yeah.
two again is quite easy to measure because it's about the electricity purchased by the company. But then again, when we're talking about scope three emissions, it's very challenging. I mean, there are some things that it's very easy, straightforward. You can go to the HR department. You can see how employees are transporting themselves. This is very not so difficult to measure. But then when we're talking about, sometimes we have contractors and subcontractors and subcontractors. It's like, how do we actually get? How do we manage the challenge to see where is exactly our raw
Mm.
materials are coming from? That's a very challenge today, and some companies are trying to overcome this with the blockchain, for example. That's a very good tool, but still, scope three is the most important because most manufacturing companies, that's where the greatest, maybe over 80% or 85% of their emissions come from, is the scope three. So it's the real challenge today, and it is, for many companies. And as long as ESG, it's not a mandatory thing to do, people usually stay.
Yeah.
Companies usually limit themselves to scope one or two emissions. No?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are still escaping from scope 3. Yeah, it's very
mm,
challenging
yeah,
for most of the company. Yeah, I've seen it. And the next challenge about, I think this is very also a very important point that we need to like stress a little bit more.
mm,
The investment in the ESG. So most of the corporate didn't see the cash flow from the ESG. They didn't see the ROI from the ESG. And I have seen many
yeah,
corporates even they dedicate a very small budget for the ESG comparing with the other like departments or the other strategic pillars within the corporates, but still the AG
yeah,
getting the lowest budget for that one. So we need to know exactly when the corporates or the investors or like the C level of the corporates or the executives they will feel the importance of the ESG so they can invest more, and they should be like very sure it is a very long term
mm,
investment and it's not about like getting the ROI on the spot or very quickly.
yeah.
It will take years, and it's also building the reputation of the company, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. But still, we
Yeah,
cannot
yeah,
forget
yeah.
about, the company culture. Sometimes, they have the way of doing things,
Sure.
the traditional way of doing things, and it will change. It's changing. The new generation are coming with a different mindset. But we cannot forget, the traditional industries. They sometimes they see sustainability is just, it's just
Yeah,
cost. They just look at it, the short term. They. I mean, it's sad to say, but that's the way it is. That's how it is. Um,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
you have
yeah, I see.
the
Yeah,
complexity, like there
right.
the frameworks that varies in countries and countries. So it's very difficult. If you're a company, you have businesses in Asia and Europe, um, to
Yeah,
measure each other because you have different KPIs according to the standards that you're following. Um,
exactly. It's a yeah, it's different from like each region. Yeah, right. Like in Europe, they have like a completely different like laws and regulations and for like different completely from Asia, for example,
Yeah,
which is like maybe it is like less or it's more flexible in Asia than Europe. Yeah.
yeah,
The other very important point that you mentioned about the most of the corporate also they are focused with the ESG on the sustainability department, while it should be like some more cultural change or cultural transformation. So every employee in the corporate he should has the commitment on the three pillars of the ESG, right? So I
absolutely.
think also the corporate should like invest in this one to make sure that
So
all the
that's
employees or all the
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a
yeah, go
part
ahead.
of how can a company adapt the ESG strategies into their core business.
Mm,
And that's one point that we need to see, like, so today, I mean, ESG isn't just a nice to have. I mean, it's a core part
yeah,
of the business strategy. And that's the thing that the companies are adapting slowly and slowly. It should not be in its sustainability
yeah,
department, it should be around the whole company, but it's happening. There some companies they're moving into, like, it's not longer just about corporate social responsibility, but it's about, integrating this into everything everything company does, from their operations to procurement all the way to product design. So what is even more exciting is
mm,
it's that the ESG goals are now so important that it's influencing uh, the top level decision makers. So, for
yeah,
example,
yeah.
if you take Total Energies, for example, I mean, they had taken a bold step by linking the CEO bonuses to the reducing the carbon intensity. So, I mean, this is
Mm,
just a way to show that
yeah,
sustainability should be also a priority at the highest level. And
yeah,
they're
yeah.
using these ESG, they're using these tracking tools. So companies are investing, artificial intelligence for ESG data analysis, and it's one way of how the companies, slowly step by step are integrating the ESG into the businesses. They're using it like for satellite monitoring of emissions, and as I mentioned, blockchain for supply chain traceability. And we have, for example, today Shell and Chevron. They're using sensors for real-time environmental performance monitoring. And we also see companies that are into the circular and low carbon products, we have some petrochemicals companies that are shifting, into bioplastics. So they're looking into like how to close the loop, also recycling and hydrogen and renewable fluids. Um,
Mm,
they're into also piloting plastic recycling plants to reuse the industrial waste. It's like and make it as a raw material. So, and we can also
yeah.
see the way, like, ESG has been adopted in companies. It's also, it's like how it's reshaping the supply chains. And this is by, engaging with suppliers to align with these ESG standards, and finding ways how to trace the raw materials and labor practices and emissions. And one example to this is Unilever. They're tracking the palm oil
Mm,
via satellite to ensure that it's not further deforestation. But back to what we say, I mean, the key that is very, very important is that companies need to train employees, and shift the culture, to make sustainability a
yeah,
real
yeah.
part of a company. So we need to train employees and change the way the culture works. So it's not just about giving them the basic information; it's about offering a specific environmental, social governance training that fits with the company values. So, and
Yeah.
again, we cannot do this in silos. I mean, we need to bring people together across different departments. So when people from different parts of the company come together, it sparks new ideas and gives everyone a sense of
Mm,
ownership over the
mm,
company goals.
yeah.
And of course, I mean, rewarding employees for their efforts can really make a difference. So then when people see that their
Yep.
actions are recognized, they're more likely to get on board with sustainability. And we see this,
Absolutely. Yeah.
for example, Schneider Electric and Microsoft. They are great examples. I mean, they had made ESG as a key part of the onboarding and leadership training. So we help employees to
Oh,
understand from the very beginning, right from the start, about the ESG. And in the end, it's about empowering employees through training, teamwork, and rewards. So that sustainability becomes part of the company's everyday mindset. Yeah,
that's right.
yeah,
So yeah, it became a part of the company or the corporate culture and mindset for sure.
yeah,
And the last challenge, which is very sensitive about the greenwashing,
yeah.
because I have seen many cases about that. Like some corporates, they mentioned that okay, we are doing some forestation. Like okay, we will plant a couple of trees here and there,
Mm,
and this is like okay, we are helping the environment. And some companies, they are saying that, as you mentioned, okay, our product is like eco-friendly
mm,
and it's bio-based, but when you track back, it's only like 2 3 5% maximum about the using the bio-based, and the rest
mm.
is the fossil or the fossil based feed as it is. So I think it's about the transparency
Yeah,
of all of the corporates to make sure that to make sure that we
mm,
have the
yeah,
avoid the greenwashing. Yeah.
yeah. But I think that actually in Europe, I think you're not even allowed to use eco-friendly or green unless you have data backing up what you're saying in the statement. So you can get a
Mm.
fine for that. And it's funny that you mentioned
Oh,
also
yeah.
planting trees. I mean, let's say like a manufacturing polluting X amount of emissions
Yeah.
daily, planting trees in the global south will not actually fix the problem. I will still
Yeah. Sure.
I'm still
Sure.
polluting the same amount. Yeah,
Exactly.
interesting.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
But anyway,
Fully
so
agree. Fully agree.
in a way, ESG is becoming, as I said, is moving from what is like a reporting to something more embedded into companies. And we see as well, yeah, especially when we talk about oil and gas, they're using like a scenario planning and risk modeling. They want to understand how different levels of global warming, right? How is this to be 1.5
Yeah.
Celsius versus 4 Celsius, and how could impact their businesses? I mean, so a lot of companies, not only oil and gas, are looking into these things. Um, so yeah, it's changing. It's changing.
Good. 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 That, yeah, that became a very mandatory thing. So just to highlight something that you mentioned, as the corporate now are taking the ESG seriously. So can we
Mm.
expect like more demand in the ESG, like ESG opportunities in the companies, like the vacant or some positions about the ESG in the companies?
Yeah, I
I
think that.
just want to shout out to all the engineers, yeah, there, if they can look at or they can shift to the ESG career, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but companies are waking up because they are seeing, they're
Mm.
understanding like, yeah, if you it, it's not a game anymore because, for example, if we look at
Right,
how it's, we all understand, carbon emissions are impacting the levels of global warming, right? And they're now
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
understand, not only the engineers but the company as a whole is trying to understand, how the increase in temperature, this like 1.5 Celsius to 4, how they could impact their businesses. So they are looking, the assets, looking at the oil fields, refinery, real estate. In the supply chains, we're talking about water scarcity, extreme weather disruptions, and and there, and then also you have the government. You have these carbon taxes happening, and the shift in energy
Mm.
demand. So it's changing, and we see today, BP and Shell, for example, they're factoring the climate risk into how they value the assets and prioritize investments, meaning that they won't back a project unless it's resilient under these future climate scenarios. So ESG is not just
Mm.
about, what tracking what's happening now, but it's about asking, if the climate shifts dramatically, our businesses model still hold up, So it's more about surviving. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. That's why, yeah, that's why, just to recap our discussion about how the ESG integrated with the corporates, and it's not like a checkbox as you mentioned. I
Mm.
like this statement. It's not a checkbox. It's not like something to do, something to report, but it became one of the very strategic pillar of all the corporates. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
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 just give us
yeah,
some recap about the whole ESG story with the corporate and the
yeah.
impact on the business and how to balance between the business and ESG. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So environmental, social, and governance, I mean, has become a must, for businesses, especially in industries like oil and gas. So it's not longer just a nice idea, but it's a key of or stating a competitive and meeting the expectation of the government, investors, and consumers, as I mentioned. So companies need to be open about their environmental impact, treat their employee their workers well, of course, and make ethical decisions to stay on the top. So that saying it's not easy to implement ESG. Yeah, we understand that. But companies face issues
Mm.
like inconsistent data, resistance to change, and pressure to focus on short-term profits. Plus, there is the danger of greenwashing, as we mentioned. Huh? So saying that you are sustainable without actually doing it can seriously hurt your
Yeah.
reputation. So, to tackle these
Yeah.
challenges, many companies are making ESG as a central part of their strategy. So, they're using technology to track their progress, creating more sustainable products, working with suppliers to meet the ESG standards, and training employees to support sustainability goals. So this helps make
Mm.
sustainability a long-term part of their businesses, and in the end, companies that take ESG seriously aren't just going to do the right thing, but they are setting themselves up for success in the future to stay alive.
Yeah. 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 This is the absolute true. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so I think we came to the end of our episode. I don't want to take much time from you. I know that you have been busy recently, so again, I really appreciate the time that you gave us today and the fruitful discussion that we have as usual, and the very important information. It is very important to give our audience more like information about the ESG and understand more how the ESG is crucial for our industry. So I really appreciate your time and really appreciate your efforts. Yeah, thank you for your time
Perfect.
again,
Thank you for having me
Maritza,
here.
and hope to see you. Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. It's our honor and pleasure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again, and have a good day.
Buenas
Thank you.
tardes. Adiós.
Buenas tardes. Adiós.